Good afternoon, everyone. Allison Schaberg here. Today, I'm here with Partners Resource Network, Marie, and the PATH Project. We're glad you're here today. If you're joining us for the first time, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to be talking about the tips for launching your special needs teen into adulthood. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you guys will get an email either later today or tomorrow with the recording and anything else we promised during the presentation. Your video and your audio is muted, so we can't see you and we can't hear you, but we know you're there. And we hope as we're going through the presentation today that you'll put your questions in the chat box. We're going to answer just as many of them as we can. Marie's going to be monitoring the chat box, and she'll be reading those out to me, and we'll kind of do that as we go through the presentation. You don't need to wait for your questions at the end. So Consolidated Planning Group, we are a holistic special needs financial planning firm, and we take great pride in advocacy and really putting out information into your hands as it relates to special needs planning, basically all things special needs and some of the things that you need to know. The reality of it is transitions is really a word that we hear. I call it a buzzword that we hear all the time. When we have teens that are in high school, crossing over to that age 18 and beyond, a lot of things change as we're kind of going through this process. So this today's presentation is really designed to kind of talk about some of those things, some of the things that you should have on your radar, and you can kind of be making a list here of the things that you've already done, or basically some of the things that should be on your list as you're moving through this process with your family member. So I come to you as a parent. I have 4 kids. I have 2 with special needs. I have one that is transitioning now, and I have one that is that has already transitioned. And kind of going through the process myself, even doing what I do for a living, I would say that the process is bumpy. The process is difficult, and it's, a lot of times, as a parent, you kind of feel like you don't know what you don't know. And so I think I was motivated to kind of start these webinar series back whenever I went through this with my own daughter, so we could put some of this information into your hands to make this transition period a little bit easier along the way. So first things first, when we're thinking about transition, there's a lot of things that transition word, encompasses. One thing that we think about is transition in care. When a person's, all their doctors are changing, they're moving from pediatrics to adulthood. Today, we're not really talking about that, but what we are talking about is basically all other things in that realm. So first things first, we really, spend time, talking about, the no comparisons and setting realistic expectations. We are all we all live in this world, and this world is full of comparisons, and it starts early. It starts, I kind of use the analogy that, when you get married, you could be literally at your wedding reception and somebody's asking you when you're going to have a child. And you could be at the hospital, you've just given birth to your first child, and they're asking if you're going to have any more and when, things like that. The kids start kindergarten, and everybody does soccer, and everybody does ballet, and everybody does everything. And we're always comparing. When did Johnny walk first? When did he sit up? When did he talk? What does he do, comparatively to all the other kids? And I think a lot of those comparisons put ourselves as parents in a box, and we put our kids in a box, and the box is, it's an unrealistic box. So when I say set realistic expectations, I can tell you that I was talking to myself as well as you, that we really got to meet the child where they are. Some of our children aren't, they aren't on grade level. Maybe their maturity level isn't the same as what would be expected for their actual age. So really understanding the diagnoses, challenges, and strengths, and really when you're looking at transition and you're looking at your path forward, really leveraging those challenges and strengths as opposed to kind of looking around what everybody else is doing. This might mean a non-traditional path, and keeping an open mind in all things. So some of our kids will never drive. but some of them have the propensity to drive in the future. One of the things that I hear from a lot of families is we want to plan for the worst and we want to hope for the best, because the reality of it is a lot of our kids with disabilities, maybe they're not there yet at 17, at 18. We're still hopeful and optimistic that they're going to get there. And the reality of the situation is that our kids and their brains are not even fully formed until age 26. So there's a lot of growth that happens between ages 18 and 26. And for some of us that have kids that are delayed, that time period might be a little bit longer. One of the things, so we talk about delaying a driver's license. One thing I like to talk about here and like to share is there are disability driving schools. There is one, for instance, there's some assessments that you can get done. So if you have a student that you are wondering, would they be able to drive in the future? Maybe they have high functioning autism. Maybe they have, some impulse control issues with ADHD or something like that. Tier Memorial Hermann does an assessment, and it's basically, it is a computerized assessment that they do in the office, and basically they can tell you whether or not your student has the faculties needed to be able to operate a vehicle. There are other disability driving schools out there. So once you've had this type of assessment, that they can actually, their whole mantra is working with people with disabilities and helping them close the gap on what they need to be a safe driver. So your typical driving schools don't offer this, so you're going to have to look for this. One of the ones that I'm aware of, it just depends on where you are in the state. In the greater Houston area, we see Miller Driving Rehab, and we also see Strawmount Driving. Those Strawmount Rehab are two that we're aware of, but you might want to look at this for your area. When we're considering options, these things might be looking at a trade school, a community college, it could be a university, it might be a transition program. A lot of the schools out there have 18+ programs. Some of your students will stay in the public school system till age 22. And we do come across families that are not aware that their kids can stay in school. But these are conversations that you should be having in your ARD meeting. You should be working with the school. If your student needs to move into a transition program or kind of stay in the public school until 21 or 22, and then kind of consider some of these options. These are all things that can and should be on the table as you're kind of looking at the things that you should consider. Some things, some of the kids are ready and they might be able to do a trade school or a community college, but maybe they aren't, they don't really have the capacity to do 12 credit hours, like a full-time load. So sometimes we can look at doing a reduced college course load. We can also look at maybe taking one class over the summer, kind of testing the waters. Sometimes you can do a dual credit course while they're still in high school to test the waters on some of these things. So you might want to check with that. We should think about living at home versus on campus, or some of the other programs that we'll talk about that that may help a student that needs a little bit extra help to be able to live on campus. But the bottom line is here is no comparisons. Self-esteem is critical. They're not behind. They are where they are, and they're going to get where they're going. It might be delayed. It might be ahead. We've got some academically gifted students that also have disabilities, but they are where they are, and that's okay. So we want to think about finding a good fit: schools, colleges, extracurricular activities, career path, and work setting. And some of these things, it may be one or both, or kind of a multitude of things that we're kind of putting into the plan. But what we're trying to avoid here is not planning ahead. We want to plan ahead so you have these options and these opportunities. And what we're trying to avoid is that the kids are coming home from the public school with no path forward as far as a transition program or where the next steps are. And we want them to have activities, and we want them to be involved and not sitting at home playing some video games. And this is especially challenging with the pandemic, we saw a lot of people, a lot of programs that moved online and things like that. So some of the social interaction was definitely kind of put on hold or at least reduced as it relates to the pandemic that we have been living in, which seems like so long. Okay, so when we're thinking about higher education, the community college, we're thinking about the university, we might be thinking about SAT and ACT exams. One of the biggest things that we need to think about is accommodations. So when it comes to accommodations, you have probably enjoyed the accommodations made available to you through the public school system. But what doesn't happen is when you move to higher education, those accommodations just don't automatically transfer to the university or community college. So you want to plan early and you want to check what the requirements are and really be prepared. And what you'll learn as you're going through this process and you're kind of looking at the different programs out there, every school is different as it relates to their requirements to apply for accommodations and how recent the testing needs to be. Most of the time, the testing, neuropsych testing, learning disability testing needs to be updated within the last 3 to 5 years. We have seen some universities be a little bit more bendable on this rule due to the pandemic, but you're going to want to check with each of those schools to see what their requirements are. Some schools will also take outdated testing when it is accompanied by your PCP or your psychologist or psychiatrist that basically says, you know, the disability is a permanent disability. The accommodations that were suggested in the old testing remain the same today. I've seen this this patient for this many years, and I am in agreement with these accommodations. We have definitely seen schools take that as well. As it relates to the SAT and the ACT, they have their own separate accommodations. You're going to want to look at the collegeboard.org is for the SAT, and you're going to type in disability accommodations in the search box, and it's going to take you to a page where there's a form that you can download, and it needs to be completed by a physician, and it talks to you about what you need to submit to get accommodations for the SAT and ACT. So basically, if your child's path is to go to the university first, each school has SAT or ACT requirements, so you're going to want to look and see what those are. And again, each of those schools have different requirements, different score requirements, different, you know, what scores they accept, if they accept, you know, the highest score from all tests, or et cetera. So you're going to want to check that out. ACT has their own website. And same thing, you're going to type in disability accommodations, it'll take you to their page. So each SAT, ACT have their own forms that will need to be completed by a physician and submitted to them. The process can take a long time. They've been better recently in the last few years than they were when my older daughter transitioned. It took months before. I think it's more like weeks now, but you want to start this early depending on when your child is going to be testing so you can make sure that they can have the accommodations that they need. Some of the accommodations that we see on the SAT and the ACT is where they'll allow for the student to test on multiple days. They may allow up to 50 to 100% more time for the exam for those kids that have processing speed delays, working memory issues, etc. They also may allow testing in a small class size. So those kids that have anxiety and other distractibility issues, they may allow in a small one-on-one testing. There are such things as having a reader or things like that as well. So those are things to think about. So what about test anxiety? Some of our students have some severe test anxiety. Some of us are not planning on doing the SAT or the ACT. And I guess what I would say is that's okay. So if your student's plan is to go into the community college first prior to going to the university, it is not necessary for them to take the SAT or the ACT. They do not have to do that. There is something called the TSI, the Texas Success Initiative. All of the universities and community colleges administer this test. Depending on where you're taking that test, you can request through the Office of Disability. You can request accommodations for the TSI as well. So the TSI is going to test reading, writing, and math. And you can pass one section but not pass the other. So if they pass reading, writing, and math, then that means that they're college ready and that they can take 4 credit courses at the community college or university. If they fail it, they have multiple attempts to keep practicing for the TSI to where they can take 4 credit classes. And you can start this earlier. So if your child is a junior or a senior and you want to see how they're scoring, you can start this earlier. And there are all kinds of practice programs out there. Some of them are free and they're offered through the community college. And some of them you can pay for and kind of do some practice and tutoring on that. As it relates to accommodations on the university and the community college level, these offices of disabilities, again, all have different sets of rules, timelines, and everything. But the big thing here is that if your child is going to community college or the university, know this stuff. Know it, do it early, because what we don't want our kids to do is to start the school year with both arms behind their back because they're not getting the accommodations that we know that they need and which has caused them to be successful through their schooling thus far. So a reasonable accommodation is required if it does not pose undue hardship when it comes to the workplace. And there's a lot of information out there. You've got the Department of Labor, the Job Accommodation Network, and some of our families are working with vocational rehab through the Texas Workforce Commission or the Texas Workforce Solution, which could be the Summer Earn and Learn program is one of them. Another one of them that you may have heard of is the pre-employment training services. They also throw out the acronym of PREETS. One thing that I want to mention when it comes to the community college and the university, there is a document and it's called FERPA, F-E-R-P-A. And so once our children turn 18, even though the schools are totally good with us paying for the tuition for our kids, guess what? They won't talk to you. So unless there is a FERPA on file, you and your student sign that FERPA, the school is never going to talk to you. So a FERPA is necessary. You want to check with the school, download that form, and get that in. Some families are of the notion that they don't need it. Other families say we're going to do it for the first year, and many families say that we're going to have that FERPA on file for all years. But basically, if the FERPA is not on file, they're not giving you any information on classes that your child's registered for. They're not talking to you. You're not seeing their grades. You're not seeing anything. So if you're taking notes, put that down. I'll say when we went through this process, that wasn't readily told. It's kind of you dig around and you find that one. So that is one important note there. Okay, so these are some of the educational options post-high school. We have many lists out there. We don't work for them, they don't work for us, but there are a lot of programs out there that are specifically designed for individuals with disabilities. Some of them are certificate programs, some of them are degree programs, 2-year, 4-year degree. Some of them, some of them are kind of more of a transition program. So these are just some of the ones that we are aware of and that we know that are out there that are worth considering and worth looking at. Also, you might want to know that some of these programs may only accept 4 students in a given year. Maybe they have a total capacity of 12 or something like that. So they don't have like endless enrollment in these programs. So again, the early bird, this is a smart thing to do to be on track as far as knowing which programs you want to apply for, when do those applications open, how many students do they take, etc. And today we will put out a copy of this presentation so you can have, we'll put out a PDF of this presentation along with the recording so you can have that list as well. So Bloom Consulting, this is one, if you're taking notes, write this down. We want you to check out Bloom Consulting. Again, they don't work for us. We don't work for them. But they are a consulting firm that they have a variety of services that they do, and they work with kids that are transitioning into adulthood, whether they're transitioning into higher learning or whether they're transitioning into the workforce. They have some vocational evaluation assessments, all kinds of different assessments that they can do. But what I have on the screen here is this program that they have that is designed to, it's kind of like a wraparound program that supports your student at the university. And it kind of, they get a coach. They have, coaching relationships that's really going to empower them to problem solve and kind of address some of their concerns, but it's also promoting greater self-advocacy, which is exactly what we want in our students. The cost for this is $1,000 per month. They do have a program specifically at Sam Houston State University that I know is going quite well. And sometimes if this is part of the vocational plan for your student that's in the VR program, sometimes the cost of this may be able to be covered through VR if it's part of that plan. So you might want to consider this. So this is something you could end up with Bloom Consulting through VR, and they pay for that, but you also have the ability to go to Bloom Consulting and kind of see what their resources are and kind of work with them basically on a private pay perspective as well. Another thing that we really spend time talking about is how do we get started with special needs planning. And so one of the things that I really like to pause and kind of talk about a little bit is because there's a lot of confusion in the world of what is the difference between a special needs attorney and a special needs planner? Why do I need both? Do you both do the same thing? I'm confused by that. So we actually hear that a lot. So when it comes to a special needs attorney, you need one, okay? So if you have a child with disability that's turning 18, there's a lot of considerations that might be happening. You might be considering guardianship. You might be considering a supported decision-making agreement or a power of attorney or a healthcare power of attorney. The special needs attorney is basically the one that's going to handle those things. Those are the legal documents, and that's what they're going to help you put in place. They might help you with a special needs trust, a first party or a third party special needs trust, etc. So I like to say that the attorneys, they're the paper and we're the money. So where it may have not mattered before, once your child turns 18, things start mattering more on having money in the right buckets. How do we fund future care for our child? Do you have a child that's going to need some form of care for the rest of their life? Will they be able to live independently or semi-independently? So these are the things that the financial planner is going to be working on. But there's a difference between working with a firm that is nuanced in special needs planning versus just a financial advisor. And there is an intersection with financial advising and special needs advising. And so a lot of times people think that's siloed. I have my financial advisor over here. I have my special needs attorney. We work with the special needs advisor. So the difference of a special needs advisor and just a traditional financial advisor is most financial advisors don't have any background or any knowledge of kind of the mechanics of what has to happen or not happen as it relates to special needs planning. And what I'm speaking about here is having money in the right buckets. Once your child turns 18, it may have not mattered before, and we're going to get into this in just a minute, but it matters where money is sitting and having money in the right buckets to make sure that they maintain benefits and maintain eligibility for future benefits going forward. So when we get started with a special needs planner, basically a special needs planner is really going to help you formulate your plan. We're going to do a lot of listening about the planning that you've done so far. We're going to do a lot of listening about your vision, how you hope things will look, and kind of talking about worst case scenario, best case scenario, things like that. So once you get started, you're going to gather all those necessary planning documents. And these documents that I'm talking about are basically all of your legal documents, all of your financial documents, to include insurance, investment statements, 401k, 403b, pensions, things like that. Those are basically the necessary planning documents in addition to your Social Security statements. We talk about developing a letter of intent. We've had a lot of webinars on, on what is a letter of intent, but basically a letter of intent is I call it a family love letter. As parents with kids with special needs, we eat, sleep, and breathe our kids. We know them backwards and forwards, what makes them tick, what makes them melt down, what are their primary diagnoses, what are the medications that they take, are there any allergies, religious preferences, et cetera, et cetera. But these are all things we have forgot more than any other person will ever know. And sometimes even people in our own household, maybe a spouse that works outside of the home, maybe as the parent, as the caregiver, you may know some of these routines and things like that. But basically what we want to do is we want to get this in writing, that if something happens to both parents, who is going to step in as that future caregiver. This is kind of this living document where they can pick up and hopefully pick up where you left off and not be scratching their head and kind of digging through piles of information and past records and things like that to figure out the information that they need to keep on keeping on and keep things going smoothly for your child. But as you're thinking about this, we want you to think not only about the vision for your special needs child, but how do you hope your vision, you and your spouse, if you're married, how do you hope your vision looks for the future? And this is especially important when we have kids that might need care for the rest of their life, not just till 18 or 22 or 25. As caregivers, as family with a special needs child, a lot of times parents put all of their needs and their vision and their goals and their respite and everything like that on the back burner for the greater good of the special needs child. And what we suggest here is that you really think of some balance here. Okay, so there's no reward. Actually, the reward is not a reward at all. It's failing health. So when we don't get the respite care, we don't take care of ourselves, we don't have some balance in our retirement of caregiving and kind of what we want for our life, the reward we get is poor health. And then it kind of limits our ability to provide the caregiving services that we have provided before. So really think about that. When I say think about that vision, we spend, 30 years working, 25, 30, 40 years working, and we all have a vision of how our retirement might look. Maybe it includes travel. Maybe you want to be a caregiver for your grandkids. Maybe, who knows? Maybe you want to volunteer. Maybe you want to make quilts. I don't know what that looks like. But for everyone else, it's different. And so often as parents, we're never, ever looking at these things. We're never thinking about that because we're thinking at the current crisis at hand. We're thinking about our busy life and how there's never enough hours in the day, et cetera. But just mark that down. It's really, really important. And have those deliberate discussions with your spouse and kind of come together with a plan for the two of you. So kind of talking about who will care for my child when I'm gone. We talk to families sometimes that say, hey, it's the end of the line. I have no idea. We talk to families that say, well, the sibling, if something happens to me, then his brother will take care of him. What we say here is really, we want you to consider touring facilities such as Brookwood, Marbridge Foundation, Daymark Living. We have a whole list of facilities out there. Some take waivers, some do not, some are private pay, all across the state of Texas. And so what we're not saying is, here's how you can institutionalize your child. That's not what we're saying. But what we would say is to take a tour at some of these facilities, because these facilities are pretty awesome. They all refer to their residents as something different. It could be members, it could be residents, it could whatever. But when you tour these, what you'll see is that the residents are happy. So you're not sticking them somewhere. They're needed, they are important, they are around others that have similar disabilities. They are working. They have jobs and things like that they feel very proud of. So when I've toured some of these facilities, I just felt I don't know, I just felt encouraged, and I love to see they have community. They have community and they have friends, and it was pretty awesome. So some people look at this as, okay, well, when I get 70 or 75 and I can't be a caregiver anymore, then maybe I'll look at this. Some people say, no, we want to promote semi-independent living skills for our loved one, and we want to look at this post-high school, our post-transition program. Some of these waiting lists can be 5 years or longer. Things got a little bit more challenging when the pandemic started. So you want to look at this, look at the list, and see what's out there. Just because you put yourself on the list and you come up on the list doesn't mean that you have to say yes. It gives you the opportunity to say yes or no. And we really want you to make careful considerations before naming siblings as a future caregiver. I know it's easy to say that. We're family and we're a tight-knit family, and Johnny's brother is going to take care of him if something happens to us. Well, that all sounds good. I mean, if Johnny's brother is 20 years older than Johnny, then that might be a good fit. But what we want to avoid here is the obligatory yes from one of your other children. This is where I'm talking about the parent talks to the other child and says, you will care for Johnny if anything ever happens to us, right? And we're shaking our head yes. And of course, the other child says, yes, of course I love Johnny, and that's what I'm going to do. The reason we want you to avoid this or really, really consider this carefully before you do something like that is because your other child has hopes and dreams. Maybe they have hopes and dreams to run a business, finish college, get married, have a baby, build a house. All of the hopes and dreams that many young people have, they have those too. And ask yourself, if you were in that situation, if you were 20-some years old and you, kind of took over the responsibility of a special needs sibling, could you have achieved what you have achieved in life? All of the things I just mentioned, or would it have been very difficult? And so if the answer is it might have been really difficult, then maybe consider alternative arrangements. And the other thing is what we like to see is that the sibling is a future trustee of the special needs trust that's going to organize and pay for care for your loved one, but then they can have a meaningful, loving relationship and not anything that, could be construed as resentment. Okay, so one of the things that we hit on earlier is basically preserving eligibility for state and federally funded programs. So what I'm talking about straight off the bat is I'm talking about SSI and Medicaid. A lot of our kids have not qualified for SSI and Medicaid. In fact, basically, if you're married and you have more than $3,000 assets to your name, or if you're single and you have more than $2,000 assets to your name and your child is under age 18, you have basically not qualified for SSI. You may have qualified for Medicaid through various buy-in programs, et cetera. But what happens is when your child turns 18, it's based off of their assets, not yours. So what I mean by that is even though they still live with you, you might still claim them on your taxes or whatever, it has to do with their assets. So when they turn 18, it's important that they don't have more than $2,000 assets in their name. Also, when they turn 18, the month that they turn 18 is the month that they can apply for SSI and Medicaid. And what we suggest is that you call and schedule that appointment for the month that they turn 18. It could be any day of the calendar month that they turn 18. It doesn't have to be after their actual birth date. We suggest you call and schedule that appointment 3 months ahead of the birthday for that birthday month. Some of the Social Security offices are still very, very backed up. They've been working from home since the pandemic. They're still working from home. So if you wait to call the month that they turn 18, you could be backlogged for, 3 or 4 months. So that's the suggestion there. So SSI and Medicaid is a means-based program. So Social Security Disability and Medicare is a worker-based program. And sometimes it really doesn't make sense. So we think, okay, my child has a disability, so they should get Social Security disability because that only makes good sense. And you're right, it only makes good sense, but that is not the way that they do it. So Social Security disability is based off of the worker and paid in. So just like on a parent's Social Security statement, every quarter that you're working, you're getting a working quarter towards that 40 quarters to be, fully insured through the Social Security Administration. So most of our kids don't have a work record, and they don't qualify for Social Security disability and Medicare right away. But what happens is when our child disability started prior to age 22, write this down, disability started prior to age 22, that child can qualify for childhood disability benefits under a parent's record. The trigger for this is if the parent is either retired or on Social Security disability themselves, then they have the ability to qualify for childhood disability benefits under the parent's record. And so basically how this works is you may have heard of RSD, the Retirement, Survivors Social Security. So when a parent retires or becomes disabled, then your child whose disability started prior to age 22 will be entitled to 50% of your benefits. So in the example that a parent is getting $3,000 a month, either in Social Security retirement or Social Security disability, then your child would be eligible for $1,500. Okay, and that continues for as long as the child's disability continues, as long as the parent is alive. As long as the child's disability has continued and the parent passes away, that benefit will be increased to 75%, up from the 50% to 75% for as long as your child's disability remains. So it is possible that later as you retire that your child may be dual qualified for both SSI and Medicaid, and basically SSDI or RSDI and Medicare. Medicare comes 2 years after the qualification. Medicaid comes along with SSI, okay? So basically when it comes to having money in the right bucket, some of the things that you can do to have more than the $2,000 assets in the child's name is to have a special needs trust, a supplemental needs trust, also called a third-party special needs trust. You can have an unlimited amount of money in a special needs trust for the individual with the disability. So that's one place more than $2,000. The second place a person can have money is in an ABLE account. We have whole presentations about special needs trusts, whole presentations about ABLE accounts, but basically on the ABLE account, you can put up to $15,000 a year into an ABLE account. You cannot have more than $100,000 before you disqualify for SSI and Medicaid. But those are basically two buckets that you can have money above and beyond the $2,000, because we all agree that the $2,000 is not certainly a limit or enough to carry on future care forever for your loved one. One of the things that people wonder about is how do we fund a special needs trust? So it's true, you can be independently wealthy and affluent and have enough money to fund a special needs trust. Some people's special needs trust are funded by inheritance from other family members, such as grandparents and things like that. But a lot of times what happens is we work 25 to 35 years and we're saving money all along the way for retirement, for that time that we're going to basically turn on retirement income, because we're going to retire and we're going to need our assets that we've saved up all these years. We're going to need our assets in retirement. So then what happens? How do we make sure that we leave enough money for a special needs child that's going to need care for the rest of their life, not just ours? And oftentimes the answer is life insurance. Life insurance on the life of the parents. And then what we do is we basically set up the life insurance beneficiary to be the special needs trust. So basically, you pay for your child's care needs just like you always have all through these years, and then upon your death, your life insurance and any remaining assets fund the special needs trust. And that special needs trust spells out how and when distributions are taken from the account, how you can what you can pay for out of that special needs trust, etc. Okay. So we talked about an ABLE account just for a minute. One of the things I like to talk about here is because some of our families have a 529C for college for their students with disability. You may want to consider converting a 529C to a 529A if your child has a disability. The reason why is the 529A and C are similar as far as, as far as the contributions are as far as, the tax favorability of the 529A and the 529C. But a 529C is for college. Some of our kids may not go to college, and to take the money out of the 529C, then you're going to be taxed and basically penalized. Now, you could change the beneficiary. So if you have a 529C, you have another child that doesn't have a disability, or they are going to go to school, you could change the beneficiary to that child should you want to. But the difference with an ABLE account is that the beneficiary is the account owner, whereas the 529C, basically the parent or whoever set this up is the account owner, and then your student is the beneficiary. The cool thing about the ABLE account is basically if you can say that the expenditure out of the ABLE account could be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability, you can pay for it out of an ABLE account. So you can pay for college out of an ABLE account. You can pay for tutoring. You can pay for a private school. You can pay for a vacation, an iPhone, a computer. Anything that could be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with disability, if these are supports or aids or et cetera. So if your child may or may not go to college, the ABLE account might be the best bet, because then you have more qualified expenses that you can take out of the ABLE account as opposed to the 529C. And again, the ABLE account does not jeopardize SSI, Medicaid, or other public benefits. But one thing that you should know is that there is a Medicaid payback on an ABLE account. So if your child is getting SSI and Medicaid, if your child dies and they have an ABLE account, there could be a Medicaid payback on that ABLE account. Any remaining dollars that are not drawn back through Medicaid, then that would go to the individual's estate. Last thing that you need to know about an ABLE account, so this is different than the Social Security in the age 22 I was talking about, as far as being considered a disabled adult child under a parent's record. To have an ABLE account, the disability had to start prior to age 26. So that is an important note as far as having an ABLE account. Marie, do we have a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do we have a question? I was thinking we had a question. I think Marie might be having
another. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. It is what will happen with the SSI of my child if he is 18 since January 2021.
So if he is 18 since January 2021, and you're saying basically you didn't apply, they will likely go backwards, back to the time that he was first eligible, and there'll be a back pay for the SSI. So that is one thing. But one thing that I should also mention, so that question brought up another point that I would like to make on the SSI. If your child happens to already be getting SSI and Medicaid and they turn 18, you do need to reapply. You do need to, call the Social Security Administration and say, my child's been getting SSI and Medicaid, and they're turning 18. And I understand that, basically there's just a different set of rules. So just don't assume that it's going to continue. If you're already getting this, don't assume that it's going to continue. You'll get it, but you just need to go through the proper channels. So again, same thing, if your child's turning 18 and you're already getting benefits, go ahead and call 3 months prior to the child's 18th birthday. And again, if you've missed that, it's okay. Go ahead and call and get that set up. But they're not going to, just because you didn't, I mean, we've had families that applied after age 22. So the magic age is 22, but it doesn't mean that you have to apply prior to age 22. It just means that you have to show that the disability started prior to age 22 to be covered under a parent's record. So that was a good question. Thank you. Okay. So when do I need a special needs trust and guardianship? So basically we were talking about the special needs trust is a place, a bucket that you can have money above and beyond the $2,000 that will preserve eligibility for, you know, for your student and their benefits. So a special needs trust is going to be that vehicle that we fund future care. So if we have a child that's going to need care for the rest of their life, not just ours, that's where that money's going to come from. So what we, you know, so there's a couple of different types of special needs trust. And again, we have whole presentations on this, but there's a first party special needs trust, and then there's a third party special needs trust. What you need to know is a first party trust is money that the child has made, they have got directly. It could have been a scholarship refund. There could have been a lawsuit, or any kind of healthcare lawsuit or settlement or things like that. That is going to be a first-party special needs trust. There is a Medicaid payback on a first-party special needs trust. Not everybody needs a first-party special needs trust, but if they have income from those sources, then they do need that. A third-party special needs trust is how we want to leave life insurance proceeds to our loved ones. A third-party special needs trust, if we have family members that are going to be leaving money to our loved ones, the third-party special needs trust is how we want to do that. And there is no Medicaid payback on the third-party special needs trust. Okay, so as it relates to guardianship, guardianship can be applied for 6 months prior to the child turning 18. On our YouTube channel, we do actually have a lot of presentations on guardianship. There's a such thing as partial guardianship, full guardianship, guardianship of the person, guardianship of the estate. Then we have supported decision-making, power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, those types of things. And again, working with a qualified attorney to prepare these documents is important. Your situation is specialized. So just like if you had a heart attack, you're not going to go see a PCP or a podiatrist. Work with a special needs attorney on this, work with a special needs advisor on these types of issues. That attorney is going to help you decide what is the best path forward. Because we have a lot of families that say, I don't know if I need guardianship. I'm hopeful and optimistic. I mean, he can do some things. They're high functioning or they're ADHD and they're not there yet, but we're still hopeful. Just because you apply for a guardianship or partial guardianship doesn't mean that it has to stick forever. They refer to your student as a ward, which is ridiculous, but it's what they refer to. They can get their rights back if the maturity level gets to where it needs to be. One rule of thumb that all of the attorneys that we work with talk about is that they look at that IQ of 70 and below or 75 and below with multiple disabilities. If they're going to go with a power of attorney or healthcare power of attorney, they have to have the mental capacity to understand what they're signing. Most attorneys are not going to sign off on anything if they don't believe that your loved one has the mental capacity to understand what they're signing. So if they don't have that capacity, then that might be your sign that the guardianship or partial guardianship might be the best route. But again, these attorneys, they're going to spend time talking to you about all of your options, what might be best, what you should or shouldn't do, and what steps you have to take to kind of achieve those things. One of the things that I talk about here on the power of attorney and the healthcare power of attorney, I know we're talking about special needs, but I know a lot of people have other kids that don't have special needs. One thing that you should consider is having a power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney for your 18 plus kids that might be going off to college. Without those documents in place, if something happens and they become incapacitated, here they are in another state or several hours away, nobody's talking to you. So having that healthcare power of attorney and power of attorney in place is important. It is important for you and your husband to have a power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney. And it is also important for you to have meaningful conversations with your aging parents, if they're still living, about having these documents in place. Having these meaningful conversations now while everybody is of sound mind and body is good. Waiting till crisis to find out, oh no, that was not in place, is not a good place to be. So put that on your list of notes to find out, what do you already have in place? What do your parents have in place? Where do they keep it? Do you have a record of all of those things? And if you need to get those documents in place for your other adult children, that will be important as well. So things to remember, to keep in mind while planning for special needs. So these are all topics. We've hit on some of them. These are things that should be on your radar when you're thinking about transition. One of the things that my firm does is we are able to develop a comprehensive special needs care plan. So if you ever have wondered, how much does it cost? How much will future care cost for my loved one that's going to need care for the rest of their life? We're able to develop those plans for you and provide those future care cost estimates. One thing, a lot of families, we always talk about the waivers and the interest list. We do have webinars on every single one of these topics on the screen. But if you're new to Texas, Texas has a very long waiting list for waivers. This is designed to help waive off the need for residential care for your loved one. Some of these are called HCS, Texas Home Living. We've got Community First Choice. We've got the class waiver, several of them. The waiting lists are long. So you do want to make sure that you're on all of the interest lists. Class has a separate phone number than all the rest of them. Most of these, you can go to the HHS website and kind of look to where to get on the list, but they have a local intellectual disability authority. Every county has one. For instance, Harris County is the Harris Center. Fort Bend County is Texana. Every county has one of them. There's Bluebonnet. There's so many of them out there. But you're going to want to make sure that your child is on the list, find out where they are. If you move, change your email address or your phone number or anything, you need to update them or you might get kicked off the list. We are nationally certified as a Social Security advisor. So we're able to do Social Security calculations. We have a specialized software that is specifically for families that have an individual with a disability. Also, for families that may have a caregiver that stays home that doesn't work outside the home, that might be drawing off of a parent's record. So we have a specialized software where we can do a complete Social Security analysis that will tell you when and how to pull the trigger on the various options through the Social Security Administration. We talked about ABLE accounts. Beneficiary designations, we didn't talk about, but it's very, very important that you do not name your special needs child as a outright beneficiary on anything you have, life insurance, investment accounts, 401ks, pensions, things like that. You want to name their third-party special needs trust as the beneficiary, not them outright. If you name them outright, there's basically two things that'll happen. Number one, they're no longer going to qualify for SSI and Medicaid. They'll lose their benefits. Number two, you'll be forced to hire an attorney and get a court order to get that money directed to a first-party special needs trust that has a Medicaid payback on it in order for your child to requalify for those benefits. So we've talked about special needs trusts and how to fund them. One important matter, if you find yourself in a divorce situation, is that a lot of times in Texas, child support will continue post age 18. If you have a special needs child, if that is your case, that child support will be considered income to the child once they turn 18 in the eyes of the Social Security Administration. So if you have child support that is continuing, you are going to need to work with an attorney, and you're going to need to get a court order for your child support to be redirected to a first-party special needs trust So that way it won't count against your child for benefit purposes. We talked about consider touring residential facilities as early as age 15 of your student. Talked about the guardianship, power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, etc., and some of the post-high school options. So this here is my team. We work on a collaborative team at Consolidated Planning Group, and we are again focused on special needs planning. But it occurred to me that I'm oftentimes the voice. We do have other webinars and things like that, but I just wanted to take a moment to share with you the team that we work on, and we work collaboratively. Maybe just put a face with some of the names. So that is what I have for today for our presentation. We always offer free personalized consultations. So whether you've already been working with an advisor and you're really, really far along your path, or if you're just getting started, or you've taken some steps and you put some of it on the shelf, we always say there's no looking back. It's about looking forward. It's not about beating yourself up about what you have or haven't done. It's really taking, a holistic look under the hood of what do we already have in place, what is foundational, what are our goals, and how are we on track to reach our goals of A, being able to retire for 25 to 35 years and stay retired and not run out of money, and B, have funds for future care for our loved one that might have more care needs than just post college. So certainly reach out to us for a free personalized consultation. We've got our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. We hope that you'll subscribe to. Our email that we will put out later today, again, will have a PDF of today's slides. It will have a link for the recording today. It will have a link to how you can schedule an appointment, and also the YouTube channel with all of the other webinars out there. So if you're thinking about guardianship, thinking about some of these other things, you need to educate yourself a little bit more. Just peruse that library and you will find content out there. We put webinars out on a weekly basis on these topics, so we hope you will certainly join us again. Having said that, Marie, I would just like to open it up to any other questions that we have before we wrap up for today.
When they are in an independent living center, will they still receive money?
So yes and no, it just depends. So it depends on what type of center they're in, and if they take waivers or they don't take waivers. It depends. It largely depends. And I know that sounds like a non-answer. So there's like community-based housing, and some of those basically will take all of their SSI for the exception of $60, or all of their SSDI, but in exchange, they live mostly for free. So it just depends upon the setup. Like places like Marbridge and Brookwood and things like that, they don't take waivers, so their income would still continue to come in. But those facilities are private pay. So again, it largely depends on if your child is getting a waiver or not, and if they're in a facility that accepts waivers or if they do not. That's a good question.
Okay, and what are the different types of facilities that offer independent living?
So that is going to be, I would say there for that, I would say to go to that HHSC website. There are all kinds of different ones. I mean, you've got group homes, you've got the home and community-based service homes. There are all different ones. Some of them are facilities, some of them are considered residential. Facilities are like, for instance, I mean, it could be a nursing facility. Some have full care, some don't. So I think that and the state determines this. So this isn't something that, we determine or anything like that, but looking at those facilities out there. Now, one thing that you can do is you can email us, because we do have a list of some various facilities out there. But the HHSC website has, You can even go deep and wide in the different types of facilities. You can see the areas that they have availability and if they have beds open. So their website is pretty good as it relates to that. But we do have a list of some facilities. We have a list of transition programs, facilities that are out there, some that take waivers and some that don't. So if you're looking for kind of a categorized list, we can send that to you. Again, we don't work for them. They don't work for us. These are just facilities that we know that are out there that might be worth considering. And you can see, where your loved one fits if they fit into any one of those. So we'll be happy to attach that to today's webinar email that we're going to send out. We'll send that out as well. So having said that,
that was all that I had.
Okay, that was it. I don't see any other questions. So thank you everyone for being here with us today. It's been a pleasure as always. Hope you'll join us again. Thank you, Marie, with Partners Resource Network and the PATH Project. Thanks for having us again. And we look forward to working with you in the future.
Absolutely. You have a great day.
Take care. Bye now.